Inside the Beltway. Thank you for watching. But British Prime Minister Boris Johnson remains in intensive care. He is not on a ventilator. He is receiving oxygen treatment. We'll follow that story throughout the morning. Here are the latest statistics on the coronavirus. In the United States, there are 357,000 known cases. 357,000. There have been 10,783 deaths. 1,164 Americans died yesterday on Monday. This is Tuesday, April 7th. Worldwide, there were 1,348,376 known cases. 74,000 people have died. 272,000 people have recovered. Here inside the Beltway, we are surrounded by cases. In Maryland, there are 4,046. In the district, 1,101. And in Virginia, 2,881. The death toll has been relatively low. 91 deaths in Maryland, 24 in D.C., 54 in Virginia. But we are supposed to be in our hotspot week. I'm devoting today's show to one thing. Who do you trust in media? Who do you trust during a time like this, or any day, actually? Government cannot always lift the curtain for a variety of reasons on what they know and what they can tell you. But media is supposed to, if they know, if they're doing their work, if they're studying. And I believe when it comes to coronavirus, you ought to use January of this year as your guide to whom you can trust going forward. I'm devoting today to what I told you in January, beginning with the first time I mentioned the virus, which was on Monday, January the 20th of this year, cut number 1. Coronavirus kills third person, spreads to South Korea and more Chinese cities. This is the headline in the Wall Street Journal this morning. Byline of Chow Deng, filed at 1:39 a.m. A newly identified virus originating in central China has spread to South Korea, killed a third person in China, and reached at least 3 more population centers within the country. As the number of live cases has more than tripled, a major escalation in the outbreak of the pneumonia-like disease. South Korean authorities confirmed Monday that a 35-year-old Chinese woman who had flown into the country from the Chinese city of Wuhan had contracted the coronavirus, part of a class of pathogens that can cause illnesses ranging from the common cold to the deadly severe acute respiratory system, or SARS. The virus has also reached China's capital, Beijing, in the north of the country, where 2 cases were identified, local authorities said. Health authorities in the southern metropolis of Shenzhen, on the border with Hong Kong, also reported 1 confirmed case of the coronavirus Monday and 8 suspected cases there. Meantime, 5 suspected cases were reported by health authorities in coastal Zhejiang province just south of Shanghai on the country's east coast, in the cities of Wenzhou, Zhoushan, Taizhou, and Hangzhou. The sudden spread of the disease raises fresh concerns as tens of millions of Chinese citizens prepare to travel, many of them to their hometowns for the annual Lunar New Year holiday. It is also likely to spark questions over the transparency of disclosures by Chinese health authorities. Now, I want you to write down January 20th, 2020. 1/20/2020. That's the first day I led a show with a report on coronavirus. Now, if past is prologue, we know that the Ebola crisis of a few years back suggests that modern travel will allow coronavirus to get to the United States. We don't know when. It could be tomorrow. And so I hope somebody at the White House and HHS is calling up Ronald Klain, who is Vice President Biden's campaign manager. And I know he's a Dem, real smart Dem. He's a Dem, but he was also the Ebola point guy for President Obama. And when it comes to breakout of virus, and I go back to the 1920 Spanish flu, there's a book out on that George W. Bush used to carry around under his arm when Ebola first became an international problem. You don't want to mess around. You just want to be prepared. And so I would hope that every single person, regardless R&D, pays attention to this story. There are a lot of other stories out there this morning, but coronavirus is the one that in the world should be looking. That was Monday, January the 20th. On Tuesday, January the 21st, I returned to the subject, cut number 2. I've got to check on the markets because the spread of coronavirus has got, I think, East Asia spooked. The markets were closed yesterday, and the fear of coronavirus has really shaken markets abroad. Hong Kong is down 2.7% this morning. Japan is down almost 1%. Early trading in the U.S., S&P down 9, NASDAQ down 35, the Dow down 46. Those are not good numbers. The price of gold, though, interestingly, is also down 15.56, and the 10-year Treasury is at 1.84. Now, what do I deduce from that? They're afraid of coronavirus screwing up China, but they're not afraid of it getting out. And I continue to repeat, if I'm in Team Trump, I'm calling up Ronald Klain, even though he's Joe Biden's campaign guy, and he was our Ebola guy, and saying, Klain, what do we do? If we get a coronavirus hit in the United States, what do we do? Because it's not as lethal as Ebola, but it's pretty doggone bad. And it's got everybody shook up in China. On Tuesday, January 21st, I asked my first political journalist guest, Eliana Johnson, editor of the Free Beacon, formerly of Politico, formerly of Fox News, just a terrific reporter, what she thought about it. Cut number 3. Now I want to switch completely. Has the Free Beacon yet paid any attention to coronavirus? Because the Hong Kong market dropped 2.8% today, overnight, and that's because the coronavirus has jumped into Shanghai, Beijing, and close to Hong Kong, the province next to Hong Kong. There have been 14 cases in Guangdong province, and there have been 4 fatalities. It looks to me as though they're panicking in Asia. Has the Free Beacon devoted any resources to coronavirus yet?
Hugh, at the risk of humiliating myself, I'm going to admit something embarrassing to you, which is that when you were talking about this earlier in the show, I actually texted my dad and said, what is coronavirus?
Aha! Stop right there. Eliana is a good reporter. She listens to this show, and she acted by asking what was going on. Too many people in the media did not do that, even though I am on early, even though the warning signs were there. Right now, I want to look at this morning's markets to give you a little heads up on what's going on because it's very interesting. I'll come back to what I said in January. That was January, Monday and Tuesday, January 20th and 21st. But the morning market report, morning business report is brought to you by Birch Gold. And I've been telling you since January, gold is a great place to be diversified into. Now, never sell in a panic. We've had a panic over the next 65 days or so that have followed since I began broadcasting about coronavirus. But gold has not only steadied, gold has gone up. And that's why Birch Gold Group is why you want to text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, 474747. If you trust me, and you should based upon what you'll hear today, you ought to trust Birch Gold because I trust Birch Gold. That's who I buy gold from. You can call them at 800-434-GOLD, or you can go to hughgold.com or just text my name, Hugh, to 474747. You can diversify your retirement portfolio. You can buy physical gold. Whatever your gold need is, Birch Gold will fill it for you. And I look over at the market this morning, and I see overnight, Japan, which is now closed, went up 2%. Hong Kong, which is now closed, went up 2.12%. England and Germany, which are open, are up 2.25% and 3.25%. There is glimmer of good news everywhere about both interventions, therapeutic interventions, and the effect of mitigating the virus is flattening the curve everywhere. Those are grim numbers that I'm telling you about, grim numbers that I predicted in January, but they are numbers that are under control. And so if you want to diversify, gold is right now at this moment $16.99. It'll go up during the day, I suspect, but it's still way below where it's going to go because I think we're going to reinflate the economy. I think we're really going to drive up inflationary pressures on currency because we need to reopen the economy as soon as humanly possible. And there's good news on the testing front. There's good news on the flattening front. There will be good news on reopening, I hope, by May. But that's when you want Birch Gold. Text my name, Hugh, to 474747. And if you are a member of a small business, get to jobcreatorsnetwork.com and join it today. Get a voice in the new bill, Phase 4, jobcreatorsnetwork.com. I urge everybody to urge the Congress to allow withdrawals from retirement accounts at 10% flat tax, because people in America need to restart their business. They got to go get the money in their retirement accounts, and they should not be taxed at normal rates. A 10% flat tax is the way to go. I'm going to come back and prove to you this is the show you can trust. This is the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. If not for me, you wouldn't have known about the virus in January. 65 days ago, here it is, April 7th, and I am playing for you today. Who do you trust in media? Because you can't trust most people in media because they're simply not well read. They do not work at it. They don't listen to sources outside of the blue bubble. They do not know what's going on. Here is my opening monologue, cut number 6 from actually, I want to use cut number 4. This is the end of my show on Tuesday, January 21st. From CNBC, China says coronavirus has killed 6 people, and authorities fretted about the added risk from millions of Chinese traveling for the Lunar New Year holiday. Around the world, airports tighten screening of travelers from China as officials confirm the coronavirus strain is contagious between humans. Zhang Zhuanyu, who had been bound from Beijing from the Thai resort at Phuket before she and her husband decided to cancel their air tickets. Authorities have confirmed more than 300 cases in China, mostly in Wuhan, a provincial capital and a transportation hub, where the virus may have originated at a seafood market. There may have been 6 deaths in that city, Mayor Zhao Zhonghuang told Chinese state television on Tuesday. The virus has been spreading around other parts of China, however, including 5 cases in Beijing. 15 medical personnel are among those infected. Abroad, Thailand has reported 2 cases, South Korea 1 case, all involving Chinese travelers from Wuhan. Japan and Taiwan also confirmed 1 case each, both nationals who had been to Wuhan. That's not good. The offshore Chinese currency fell 0.6%, biggest daily drop since August of 2019. Airline and travel stocks fell across the region. European shares also slipped on concerns about the impact of the outbreak. And here's the bottom line. Ron Klain, doggone, he's a Democrat. He's a very smart guy, but Ron Klain is a Democrat. He's Joe Biden's guy. But he ran the Ebola response for President Obama. It was late getting started. They got Klain. Klain got it organized. He knows what he's talking about. Somebody at the Trump White House needs to buzz him up. Say, Ron, come over and give us a briefing, please. I know a bunch of the people are with the president in Davos. But the vice president would be well advised to say, hey, Ron, come over. Tell me what you know. What do we do here? Because if we get 1 case in the United States, you will be like Eliana Johnson this morning. You'll remember I told you about it. And I'm telling you right now, you don't sleep on this stuff. If you know about the great epidemic of 1918 and 1920, you do not sleep on this stuff. You don't. So, but we did. The next morning, I opened the show. I'm going to go back in the next segment and play for you my first interview on this subject with Admiral Stavridis on Wednesday the 22nd. But here's my monologue on Thursday, January 23rd, cut number 6. Meanwhile, in real news, 2 more Chinese cities, 2 more, were put on lockdown by the government authorities, expanding an unprecedented experiment to try to contain a fast-spreading virus that has killed at least 17 people and infected more than 500. On Thursday, authorities in Huanggang, a city of 7.5 million people, said they won't let long-distance trains and buses run from the urban center and will shut its public transportation system in the lockdown zone effective midnight Friday local time. Ezhou, another neighboring city with just over 1 million residents, said it would enact similar restrictions. What they are trying to do is get ahead of the human-to-human spread of a virus that kills at about the same rate as the Spanish flu. It's not as deadly as MERS or SARS, but it's a bad bug. It's in the coronavirus family. It's called the Wuhan virus. And I've been following it since Monday, and I'll keep following it. All right, what I want to tell you right now, it had killed 17 people on January 23rd. It has killed 74,369 people now. Who do you trust? You might want to trust the person who was telling you about it on January 23rd. When I come back, my first interview about the virus occurred on January 22nd with Admiral Stavridis. We'll replay a portion of that for you when we return to this, the April 7th, 2020 Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces.
My Place America is right here in the ReliefFactor.com studio talking to you. It is on Accountability Day. Whom do you trust? Now, the government can't always tell you what's going on, but it's the media job, my job, to figure out what the heck we can what is going on, and to tell you the truth about what's going on. I'm revisiting because a lot of people out there have blown their credibility, and a lot of people are trying to cover up that they blew their credibility in January, not me. I'm not going to judge anybody. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of study. It takes a lot of actual hard work to be ahead of the curve on something like the virus. The latest number, of course, Boris Johnson is in intensive care receiving oxygen therapy. He is not on a ventilator. Our prayers are with him. In the United States, we have 357,000 confirmed cases. The death toll is at 10,783. And 1,164 people died on April 6th. Here it is, April 7th. Worldwide, and these numbers cannot be trusted completely because we know China is lying to us. We know Iran is lying to us. But if you take their official numbers, the worldwide Johns Hopkins toll is 1,348,376 cases, 74,369 dead. And I believe, again, China is deeply understating its fatality rate. And we'll keep you posted on other stories as they unfold. I want to go back to the first interview I did about the coronavirus. This was on Wednesday, January the 22nd, with our friend Admiral James Stavridis, retired Allied Supreme Commander of NATO, retired Navy, four-star Admiral, from my conversation on January 22nd, cut number 5 with Admiral Stav. Now, Admiral, I want to close by going to the arrival in the United States of the Wuhan coronavirus. And I pray it's one case, not many cases. I hope they've called Ron Klain, President Obama's point man on Ebola. But what, from your position as a strategist, is the potential of pandemic in China? They're up to 900 cases. 9 deaths and 600 cases. It's jumped to South Korea, the United States, Japan. It's not a problem, the president said this morning to Joe Kernan. I just wonder what thoughts you have on the prospect of pandemic, which eventually will return. That's why I always bring it up. We had the Spanish flu in 1918 to 1920. It eventually will come back. What's your thought on strategic consequence of this?
There is no question we will face a pandemic globally sometime in the coming decade or so. And the evidence, Hugh, and you know this is human history, despite all the advances in medicine that have been remarkable, about every 100 to 200 years a pandemic occurs. There's no reason to think that's going to have suddenly changed. And I'd encourage everybody to go back and just Google Spanish flu, Spanish influenza. It infected 40% of the world's population with a mortality rate of 20%. In today's numbers, that would kill near 1 billion people. So we ought to be very concerned about this. And if you look at the faces of the medical professionals, the CDC professionals, as they come on air and talk about it, they are deeply concerned, and I am too. This could be the biggest story of 2020. Let's hope not. Ebola was contained largely, although it killed thousands in East Africa. I think we can get our arms around this is the bottom line. And here's the advantage of the fact that it's coming out of China, is that it's an authoritarian country. Normally, I'm not in favor, as you know, of authoritarian countries. But if you have to have a pandemic start somewhere, go for an authoritarian country because they can ruthlessly crack down, shut down society, tell everyone to go inside, keep everybody at home, ruthlessly quarantine. So let's hope China can get its arms around it. What we need to do here is, A, be aware of the threat, B, put national resources against it immediately, and C, when we see individuals, they do need to be ruthlessly quarantined at this stage of the pandemic. So
now, Admiral, I also, very quickly, the good difference between SARS and MERS is that China is transparent this time. They were not the last time. I think that's a major advantage, isn't it?
It is. And again, what you want is to have a place of a pandemic is a capable society, China, check, an authoritarian society, China, check, and transparency where they are sharing with the world. So far, check. I think we're going to get our hands around this one, but pandemics are going to be a serious issue in this decade. Watch
Guess
for that
what?
one.
Guess what? The Admiral and I were wrong. China was not transparent. China had lied. China continues to lie. That's why we have 74,000 people dead, and that's why you can't even trust that number on April 7th, because China continues to lie about this. On the same day, on the day after I spoke with Admiral Stavridis, I talked to Dr. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, about the epidemic, cut number 8.
How
All right,
about that?
very quickly, the UAE has announced that they're screening passengers on China flights after the outbreak of the Wuhan coronavirus. Has Israel taken any steps like that yet, Dr. Oren?
No, not yet.
You expect them to be quickly...
We got a problem with the Nile virus.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, Nile virus and flu.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Michael Oren.
Problem.
So on January 23rd, Israel was not worried. I talked to General David Deptula on the same day, Thursday, January 23rd, about the pandemic, cut number 9. Now, I want to switch subjects on you very quickly, General. Yesterday, Admiral Stavridis and I just spent 2 minutes talking about the Wuhan coronavirus. Chinese movies are being canceled. Chinese cities, including one of 7.5 million, in addition to Wuhan, are locked down. The military plans for this sort of thing, because the Spanish flu decimated our troops in 1918 to 1920. What do you make of the early response in the United States to this? Are we playing it about right, or ought we to be setting up a few more flares?
I think we're playing it about right. I think people are paying appropriate attention. They're taking action to take a look at and monitor people who are coming in from suspect areas. And I think it's a prudent action that we need to continue to move in that regard. And depending upon the severity of what happens, we should respond accordingly.
Does the Joint Staff take note of such a pandemic potential? Is that an issue that will rise up to the chairman? Will it be in the tank? Will it, or do you have to be summoned by the White House to the game? Eventually, the military got involved with the Ebola situation. What do you think?
No, these kinds of issues are monitored in the Department of Defense and in across the board. I mean, the chairman gets briefed on a daily basis of what's going on around the world, and this clearly would get to his attention. With respect to actions that are taken, that's all dependent upon the severity of the conditions and how U.S. soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines may be affected.
Thursday, January 23rd, I included a virus update in my Birch Gold Group pitch to you, cut number 7. Get the information, be diversified, be protected. There are a lot of people in China that wish they had done that. The Hong Kong index down almost 3% on Monday, rebounded a little bit in the 2 days in between. This morning it's off 1.5%. Why? They know this is bad. I'm hoping they keep it contained in China, but it's going to really dent the Chinese economy. 10-year Treasury in the United States is down to 1.77. Yesterday, the Dow was off 9 points. The NASDAQ was up 12, and the S&P was up 1. This morning, the S&P is down 1 again. The Dow is down 26 in pre-market trading. The NASDAQ is up 5.5 points. It's not really having much of an impact here, but it's having quite a lot of impact abroad. Birch Gold Group can help you be protected against pandemics, earthquakes, stock market shocks, panics. You know, the good news is that gold is up at 1,700. I was telling you about that. That was Thursday, January 23rd. On Friday, January 21st, the first full week that America knew about the Wuhan virus, I gave an opening monologue on this show. Again, this is Friday, January 24th, cut number 10. Across the globe, the Washington Post reports, a young, healthy man from Wuhan and a person living 1,500 miles from the epicenter of the coronavirus are among the latest victims of the outbreak, which has incited fear and anger across China as the important Spring Festival gets underway. Reports of 8 new deaths from the pneumonia-like virus, taking the toll to 26, come as authorities enforced a lockdown across large parts of the province of Hubei, population 59 million. In the British newspaper, The Telegraph, the headline is China locks down 14 cities as Wuhan coronavirus spreads. China on Friday confirmed it has now imposed travel restrictions on 14 cities, home to tens of millions of people, and pledged to build a new hospital within 6 days in Wuhan, the epicenter of a deadly virus that is sweeping across the country and throughout Asia. The number of cases has jumped to 830, the death toll to 26. 2 fatalities now reported outside of Wuhan, in Hubei province, in the northeastern province as well, which borders Russia and Mongolia. So, I told you about this on Monday, the first day of the story. I've told you about it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It got worse every single day. And I just continue to believe that you need to pay attention to this, even as we delve into impeachment. Then I spoke to Senator Ted Cruz on the same day, Friday, January 24th, about this cut number 12. I want to ask you about presidential power and coronavirus, and we have a minute, Senator. The Chinese authorities are trying to shut down an entire country, 14 cities. It's spreading rapidly. There's one case in the United States. There's no cause for panic. I've been assured by senior officials at the White House there are plans, et cetera. But what are the presidential powers in the event that, in fact, a pandemic of any sort now or in the future come to the United States?
Well, I'll tell you, I have received similar assurances. We have a briefing scheduled this morning on the details of the virus and the potential threats. But in the case of a pandemic, there are substantial emergency powers, and when it comes to a potential epidemic in terms of quarantining individuals, quarantining travelers, trying to prevent the spread, trying to set up hospitals to treat the United States, we have some capability to do it, but thank God we have never faced a massive pandemic, and there's no doubt it would stress both our legal institutions and our healthcare institutions. And so preventing it from coming in on the front end is by far the best way to do it.
And not damaging the presidency's powers or the institution of it concurrent with the outbreak of one in China would also, I think, be foremost in people's minds. That was Ted Cruz and I talking on Friday the 24th. And I'm glad we did. Let me depart for a moment and tell you, if you're a small business right now, you have to go join jobcreatorsnetwork.com, because there is going to be a phase 4 package. It's already under development. I have been talking with senators on the Hill about what ought to be in it. I believe there ought to be a 10% flat tax on withdrawals from your retirement. I think you ought to urge that. Just let everyone use their own money, Congress. I also think that you need to get out there and exercise every day. Did 6 yesterday. ReliefFactor.com. All throughout the virus and all throughout the time after the virus, I'll keep telling you, take this every morning. Here's my lukewarm coffee. I've got my my First Presbyterian Church of Saintfield mug this morning, because that's where all the Hewitts came from, Saintfield, Ireland. It's in Ulster, and I went there, and so they gave me a mug. That was nice. I was there on a Sunday, then I went to Mass. They were a little bit disconcerted by that. ReliefFactor.com. Icarian curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Take it every day. You'll be able to find support for the temporary relief and the minor aches and pains that come with the era of the virus, when you're walking alone, running alone, doing new things alone. You can take ReliefFactor.com along with 10,000s of others of people every morning. ReliefFactor.com. Coming right back. What did I do on week 2? Listen. Welcome back, America. That music is the Courier from Last of the Mohicans. That's what I am, the long carbine of reason. I bring you actually the facts, and I'm reviewing with you because I am fed up with the media telling you that nobody knew, that they did a good job. No, they didn't. Mainstream media did a lousy job on this. I did a great job on this because Dwayne and I and Adam and Ben spend a lot of time on the news every day bringing you what you need to know. This is the beginning of the second week of the pandemic when it was known. Remember, the Chinese Communist Party lied to us. But by January 27th, Monday, January 27th, I am on the case. Here is just an average caller on Monday, January the 27th. Dave in Los Angeles, cut number 14. Dave in L.A. Good morning, Dave. You're up early.
Oh, yes, I love listening to you, Hugh. Now, I want to talk this through with you. I'm an investor, and I know you are, as a lot of your listeners are. And even on Friday, the experts were saying, well, gee, it's just a little blip. It always comes back stronger. However, I believe that this will be more prolonged than the H1N1 and the SARS. As you mentioned, the incubation, it's contagious before the incubation period. And I'm concerned that this is going to spread. China, they have pride, and it's always worse than they'll admit. And here's something to think through, Hugh. Workers that have to work day to day for their food, and workers that go paycheck to paycheck. Well, they're not going to be making money. What's going to happen? Food's going to disappear. And
So stop there. What Dave is referring to is what I want to go back to, cut number 13. I told you people on January 27th, Monday, asymptomatic transmission was possible. Now, I'm not down on Bill de Blasio. He's doing the best he can. He has limited abilities. But when he said this week he didn't know that it was an asymptomatic transmission, well, he should listen to the Hugh Hewitt Show because I told you on Monday, January the 27th, cut number 13. Now, I think people will panic with coronavirus and overreact like they always do. I read last night a Chinese doctor saying it will peak in 2 weeks. And then it will recede because the incubation period is 10 days to 2 weeks. Here's what I do not understand and which I wish to have your phone calls on. I want an explanation, 1-800-520-1234. I may have come through the airport with coronavirus patient LA or coronavirus patient OC or coronavirus patient AZ. There are 3 in the southwestern United States, 1 in LA, 1 in Orange County, 1 in Arizona. There's also 1 in Washington State, and there's 1 in Chicago, I believe. 1 in Toronto. Okay, what flights did they come on? I'm sure I wasn't on that flight because I came from east to west, and they came from China somehow to get to the United States. I'm assuming they came through LAX, but maybe they went to Ontario, maybe they went to San Diego, maybe they went to Orange County. I thought that I read that the CDC was funneling all Wuhan originating passengers through LAX for screening. Well, I came through LAX. I just like to know when they came through. And if I had been on a plane with them, I would like to know that. But the CDC is not revealing that information, and I do not understand why. Given the incubation period is 10 to 14 days, and while asymptomatic, meaning you don't display any symptoms, during that period of time, you are contagious. So you're going to sit next to coronavirus patient LA or coronavirus patient OC and not have known. You could have been laughing and yucking with them, sharing swigs from your siphon. I'm joking. Nobody does that. But if you sat next to a coronavirus patient, wouldn't you want to know? In the row ahead behind you in the airplane on which you were, using the bathroom in which you used, if it's a China to the United States flight. 5 confirmed. And the CDC is saying, no, we're not going to tell you that. I just think the White House ought to call over and say, we don't need to know their names, and you don't have to tell us what hospitals they're in. They're in isolation. That's good. But release the flight, release the airport, release the time of entry, and release any public places at which they went until they were hospitalized. How hard can that be to keep? That was the opening monologue on my Monday, January 27th show, demanding that asymptomatic travelers from Wuhan be identified and that contact tracing be conducted. No one believed me. I had a caller, cut number 15.
Ooh, child, things will get bright.
Welcome back, America. Coronavirus, 81 dead, 2,700 sick. Most of that in the People's Republic of China, though there are 5 cases in the United States, no fatalities. We continue to follow that. I continue to wonder why the tracking data is so sparse from the Centers for Disease Control, 1-800-520-1234. Would love to hear what you have to say about that. And what I have to say about that is the CDC failed on the test, the CDC failed on tracking, the CDC failed on contact tracing, but they didn't mean to. Nobody meant to. What really failed? The media. Not me, the media. When you hear people beating on their chest and growling at the president and criticizing Dr. Birx or Dr. Fauci or the vice president. Remember, they all failed. They all failed. Every one of them failed. That's all from January. I am playing you the first week and the first day of the second week, and I'll play more for you. Don't forget, in this time of quarantine, nosafespaces.com. Go watch a movie that's worth seeing with Dennis Prager and Adam Carolla. Save 25 will get you a good discount over at nosafespaces.com. Then come right back. I'm laying down the evidence that American media is lazy. They do not listen to people who do their homework like me, and they do not care.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings, I'm Hugh Hewitt. 400 affiliates across the United States, bringing you sweet reason every day. Here is the latest grim news. Boris Johnson is in intensive care on oxygen therapy, not on a ventilator. Pray for him. The United States totals 357,000 people. 357,000 people are infected. 10,783 people have died from the virus. 1,164 people died yesterday. Worldwide, and you have to take these numbers with a grain of salt because we do not believe the Chinese Communist Party or the government of Iran, but worldwide, Johns Hopkins University reports 1,348,376 infections, 74,369 deaths, 272,000 recoveries. That death number, I believe, is substantially higher because I believe China is lying to us. There is very little self-awareness in the media. There is an extraordinary attempt to blame President Trump for this. There is an extraordinary attempt to erase the media's record on this. There is an extraordinary attempt to say the conservative media lied to you. Look, I'm responsible for my show, and I am playing for you what I did in January. I'm up to week 2 of my conversation of the virus, which began on January 20th. And this is from January 27th, Monday, a conversation with Selena Zito. Can we play cut number 16? Tell me something. I want to switch to coronavirus, Selena. I came back to Southern California on Friday, passed through LAX, back in Orange County. Kobe's helicopter probably took off about a mile from where I was at church yesterday. It's just right back to the epicenter of news. But there are 2 cases in Southern California, one in L.A., one in Orange County. I don't know which hospitals are that, nor do I think that should be released. But I do think that the CDC ought to tell us where the patients entered, at what time, on what flights, and what public spaces they went to. But they're not doing that. Why do you suppose they're not doing that?
I don't know, but I was thinking, in fact, I have to fly into LAX on Wednesday, and I was thinking about that. I mean, why, people should know where this is happening, why they aren't, and it's so odd that they're not giving us information. I mean, if you remember was it Ebola, where, we knew where every patient came in. This one is a really, really odd way they are preserving the anonymity of what's happening, and I don't understand why.
Now, I've got rumors as to which hospitals people are in. I don't want to publicize those because I don't think it'd do anyone any good to have bunches of cameras around a hospital. And I don't want to know the person's name. They have the right to their privacy. If I get sick someday, I don't want my name all over the web. But I do think that the flight the individual was on, the airport they came through, the time, and if they went shopping at the Mall of America, no one has. There aren't any patients up in Minnesota. Let me be clear. I'd like to know they went to the Mall of America.
Absolutely.
Selena was with me. All right, this is again on Monday, January 27th, more than 65 days ago. All right, so as you hear people leveling indictments at folks for not covering it. There is no excuse for the mainstream media not to have covered this. None. Those that had their minds wrapped around the axle of impeachment, shame on you. Here is my monologue from the second hour on Monday, January 27th, cut number 17. It's just a sad day in Orange County. Also kind of a tense day in Orange County because one of the coronavirus patients in the United States is in Orange County, another one in L.A., another one in Arizona. And the CDC is unimaginably closed mouth about this. Where are the patients from? Which cities? What flights did they come in on? What airports did they move through? And before they were diagnosed, did they go to any public places? I mean, if you sat next to them at church and did the kiss of peace last Sunday, wouldn't you want to know? The coronavirus has a 10-day, 2-week incubation period through which you are contagious, which is why it's going to be kind of a nightmare for China. Now, futures are down 400 points, 1.4% on the Dow. I think there's a little bit of an overreaction. We got 5 cases in the United States, so it might be a buying opportunity. A bit was not a buying opportunity. All right, so I didn't get everything right. But I thought we were much better defended at the border. I went into a monologue again, Monday, January 27th, in segment 6 of the show, cut number 18. I have in my hand the OCGov.com alert on the novel coronavirus. Orange County has one confirmed case of novel coronavirus. No evidence that person-to-person transmission has occurred in Orange County. That's good, but you actually wouldn't know that for 10, 12 to 14 days. Risk of infection to the public in Orange County is believed to be low, but you really don't know that. The one case identified in Orange County, a male in his 50s, is a traveler from Wuhan, China. Doesn't tell us the day, flight, or where they entered. The healthcare agency provided guidance to the traveler upon arrival in order to reduce exposure to the public while waiting laboratory testing to confirm novel coronavirus. So, doesn't tell us why they identified this individual. Did they identify everyone? LAX? This individual is currently being treated at a local hospital and is in isolation in good condition. Good. Hope they recover. A lot of people do. The 80 people who have died, I don't know if they got treatment at all in China. In consultation with the Centers for the Control and Prevention of... I'm going to stop there. I was believing China was telling us the truth. Let me be clear. China lied from the beginning. China owns this disaster. China is behind this catastrophe. It's China, not China, the Communist Party of China. President Xi Jinping. They are responsible for this. Senator Joni Ernst joined me on my show on Monday, January 27th, cut number 19. Coronavirus has come to the United States. I'm back in California. I came back on Saturday. Friday night, actually, came through LAX. In LA, in Orange County, there are 2 cases. Why is the CDC not announcing the flights on which the patients came, the airports through which they traveled, and any public spaces they may have been in? Even though I understand patient privacy, you don't want to name the hospitals, although I know one of them in which the patients are. But you do want, I think, to alert people to the flights, airports, and time and point of entry, don't you?
Yeah, I think that is important, Hugh, and this way folks can at least be aware. If they were on a flight, then they certainly can be watching for symptoms. They can, of course, alert others that they've been in contact with. Of course, we don't want mass pandemonium, but we do need people paying attention to this, and we need to monitor the situation very closely. So CDC, I know, is working with many of these states. They are working with state and local authorities, but the public needs to remain vigilant and take those precautions. And so I would agree we need to make sure our folks have the most accurate and updated information as possible.
Yeah, I then asked Senator Ernst about the White House cut number 20. Again, this is from Monday, January 27th. No, I want to return and conclude with coronavirus. China's got a major problem on their hand. The markets are very disturbed this morning. They'll settle down after a day or two. Same thing happened in Asia. But do you believe that the White House is on alert, that they have done everything they need to do to assure America? Because President Obama got beaten up over a weak Ebola response when Ebola became a pandemic. Right. Do you think the White House is prepared?
I think the White House is prepared on this, and again, I know that the CDC is providing regular updates to Congress as well, so they'll continue to work closely with state and local health departments. My great fear, though, is that the media is paying so much attention to little things that are occurring in the impeachment trial and blowing things like that up. Not that it's not important. The impeachment is important, but this virus outbreak is very important as well. And if we could just get that message out across the United States, I think it would be a lot more helpful.
Good. I hope that's Joni Ernst. That's Joni Ernst, Senator, January 27th on this show. Impeachment is obscuring our ability to focus on the pandemic. Thank you, Senator Ernst. Thank you, Senator Ernst. The market has shuttered for 2 months. It is beginning. It reflects good news and bad news. This morning, it's brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. The market report brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They refinance your house. If you've got to get money out of your house to get through this, they help you refinance your house. If you get money for your business to get through this, they will help you get through this. If you want to buy property right now, a lot of people say, well, I'm done with the market. I made some money in bonds. I'm going to go buy real property. That's fine. AndrewandTodd.com. Call them, 888-888-1172. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you money. They're not brokers. 888-888-1172. This morning, yesterday the Dow was up 1,627 points, NASDAQ up 540 points, S&P up 175. I don't know what's going to happen in the market today, the morning show, but I do know that overseas, Japan, which is now closed, went up 2%. Hong Kong went up 2%. England and Germany are up 3% and 4% respectively. Gold is at 17.05. Crude is up to 26. It does seem to me that the stabilization is occurring as glimmers of hope come through. Good time to get money out of your house if you need it. Andrew and Todd.com. I return to my show about who can you trust in the media? Well, the answer is Hugh Hewitt. I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Mount Sakurajima, I'm hopingly saying Sakurajima, is near the southern end of the Japanese archipelago. Had a massive explosion in 1914. Massive. It's erupting this morning. Just to let you know, that's what's going on in the world. I am reviewing today with you just one time, because I am sick and tired of hearing mainstream media say nobody saw it coming, don't blame us, we weren't diverted by impeachment. Yes, they were. Yes, the country was. I was not. I covered it extensively, and I'm laying down for you, the people who knew what they were talking about. Here is my monologue on January 27th, Monday. Right, the second week I covered it, 65 plus days ago, cut number 21. And the Dow is down 376 points this morning. Why is that? Coronavirus. Even Amazon is down $33, and I think Amazon's going to be the big winner in a world where people stay indoors in China and everywhere. It's going to be Jack Ma's company, whatever that's called in Alibaba. In China, people aren't going to want to go outdoors. It's really spooky what you look at Wuhan. So I've got the Telegraph story this morning. The Foreign Office is drafting plans to extract British nationals stranded by the coronavirus outbreak in Wuhan. The government confirmed this morning that it is working on making, quote, an option available, close quote, for Britons to leave Hubei province, which has effectively been shut down by Chinese authorities in a bid to contain the virus. A British Foreign Office spokesman said, quote, we continue to monitor developments closely and are in close touch with the Chinese authorities. The safety and security of British nationals is always our primary concern. The Foreign Office has recently updated its guidance to advise against all travel to Hubei province, which has been on lockdown for several days. Always a few days late, right? Other countries, including the U.S. and France and Japan, have already mobilized plans to get their citizens out of Wuhan. But, you know, the real deal is not Wuhan. The real deal is, what do you do with people who are coming to the States from Wuhan? I've seen some calls on the web. Stop them from coming into the United States. Well, you know what? You can't do that if they've got an American passport or an American visa. You'd have to withdraw the visa. So they're greeting people. They're funneling all Wuhan originating passengers. But the trouble is the Chinese moved too late. I mean, they got cases all over the world. The key thing is for the CDC is to spill your guts information-wise. Where is every case? What county generally? Where were they in public? What airport did they come through? What flight did they arrive on? And then to contact individually everyone who knows that person and everyone who was on those planes. But the web being the web, it's a 50-year-old individual, for example, in Orange County. I know the hospital they're at. It's not being released. I'm a news guy. I know these news things. I have sources. Stop. But I'm not going to. I'm a news guy. How many news guys are there, or news gals, who told you about this? This is January 27th. January 27th. I started talking about the need for a vaccine on January 27th. It's a 12 to 18-month process. I knew that, but I began to tell you early on, we're going to need a vaccine, cut number 22. Amazon is down $30 a share. I thought they would be better off than others because demand for their service is going to increase around the world as people don't want to go out if coronavirus gets legs. Hopefully it doesn't get legs. I read Johnson & Johnson, the good news, believes that they can, what's the guy say? Johnson & Johnson Chief Scientific Officer Dr. Bob Steffel tells CNBC on Monday that he believes the drug maker can create a vaccine in the coming months to fight against the fast-spreading coronavirus. Could take up to a year to bring it to market, though. That's bad news, good news, and bad news. You can find a virus, can take a year. It'll be interesting. China had better crack down, and the United States had better get very good at information distribution. And you know what? We need to be better at not believing anything that comes from the Chinese Communist Party. But that's January of this year. So we need till January of next year minimum to get a vaccine out and tried. I think we're making great. There are glimmers of hope in the market. There are glimmers of hope. But you're still locked down and you should be staying at home. Go watch No Safe Spaces. All right? NoSafeSpaces.com. Dennis Prager, Adam Carolla. If you go and do that, you can use Sale 25 and save 25% off, Sale 25. And if you're a small business, now is the time to join JobCreatorsNetwork.com. Don't just trust Hugh Hewitt, though I was right about the virus from January forward, from January 20th forward, as I'm proving up to you. Trust your own instincts. You need someone to fight for you in this Phase 4 package. That's the jobcreatorsnetwork.com, jobcreatorsnetwork.com. I'll come right back. More proving it up for you after the break. Welcome back, America. It's going to come around back again that you're going to have to choose people to trust. The only regret I have about not having my show on MSNBC anymore, what a pain in the neck it was, lowest rated show in the history of MSNBC, is if I had been on, I would have warned you on that channel when no one else did. In January, as I did on this show, about the virus. Now, not all journalists were asleep at the switch. Tim Alberta of Politico, a fine young journalist who used to join me all the time on my MSNBC show 2 years ago, joined me on Monday, January 27th to talk about the virus. Here is that clip, cut number 23. Now, I also believe that the coronavirus story by the end of the week will be the dominant story, surpassing impeachment, Kobe, and everything else, because it's a pandemic. And in China, they had 749 new cases overnight. I'm out in Orange County. I came out on Saturday, went through LAX, Friday, went through LAX, spent the night in LA, down in Orange County today. And we got a case in LA and a case in Orange County. And the CDC is not telling us flights, airports, or public places through which the patients who should remain anonymous, or the hospitals, which ought to remain off the map, they're not telling us anything. What's the deal with that, Tim Alberta?
You know, this is one of those things, Hugh, and I'm sure you're in the same boat. I'm really, I think, not just as a journalist, but as a consumer of news and as a concerned citizen, I want to be very careful to sort of strike the appropriate balance between wanting to be really, really informed and wanting to be really cautious and wanting the government to be responsive and people to understand what's going on, and also not wanting it to boil over into the, Ebola craziness that we lived through, and which I think obviously in retrospect we realized was probably not covered the right way, and people were sort of panicked over nothing. So, look, I was just reading. 20 minutes ago, I was just reading in the Wall Street Journal some of what you were saying, and it's very frightening, and it seems like it has the potential to spider web in a way. I'll tell you this, the really frightening thing to me right now is, to your point about the government and the CDC not giving us the information that some people are asking for. Most of the information we're getting right now is coming from Beijing, and that's the scariest thing of all, because you have no idea if the information that's coming out of the Chinese government is anywhere near reliable.
Now, the asymptomatic nature of the disease, as well as its incubation period of 10 to 14 days, argues strongly, in my view, and Joni Ernst agreed with me last hour, and the transcript and audio are posted, that the CDC, while maintaining patient confidentiality in hospital and anonymity, ought to release flight, airport, and public place where these individuals were, just so people can self-report and self-monitor. It doesn't seem that hard to me, and I think Ron Klain agrees. I'm not sure who was the Ebola czar for Obama. I think that President Trump needs a Ron Klain. Maybe Jim Talent, who is, by the way, along with Bob Graham, in the last decade, one of the smart people on bio and pandemic threats.
So I'm a little surprised that we haven't heard more about this, not just from the administration, but in general. And my hunch is that, again, just scrolling through sort of top headlines this morning, it sort of occurred to me that if this had happened 5 or 10 years ago, then it might have been different. But the state of the news cycle at the moment is obviously, so condensed and accelerating at such a clip that it's hard to keep up. My hunch is that by the end of the week, yeah, you're right. To your point earlier, we're probably going to be hearing a lot more about this, and hopefully, what we're hearing is good news that they're containing this. But the trajectory of it thus far doesn't suggest that that's.
And on Tuesday, the next day, the 28th of January, what Tim Alberta was saying, media was not covering it. Why? They were covering impeachment. Now, on Tuesday, January 28th, things are getting worse in China. Hong Kong, China is going to be drastically reduced significantly due to coronavirus, according to the Wall Street Journal. Chief Executive Carrie Lam said cross-border travel between the city and the mainland would be reduced significantly due to the spreading outbreak of the Wuhan coronavirus. The Telegraph has a columnist, Holmes Chan, whose column reads, Hong Kong's coronavirus panic reminds me of the dark days of SARS. And that's because the death toll in mainland China has passed 100. It's now 108 people have died from the virus. Beijing has lost its first fatality. And overnight, it went to 40. I always want my statistics to be correct. The number of confirmed cases in China surged to 4,515 as of January 27 from 2,835 a day earlier. Not the kind of growth rate you want. Meanwhile, in the United States, according to Washington Post, the U.S. is expanding screening of passengers to 20 airports. A little bit late, but better late than never. Those 20 airports still only pick up 90% of the passengers. It's not fast enough. According to the Washington Post, officials in the U.S. and China have said the best estimate so far of the coronavirus's contagiousness is that it will spread to between 1.5 and 3 people from every person who is sick. Now, that's much less transmissible than measles, for which the rate is as high as 18.2. But any number above 1 is problematic. Ian Lipkin, director of the Columbia University Center for Infection and Immunity, said it's still too early to predict how widespread or deadly the outbreak will be. He added that putting the outbreak in the context of other prevalent diseases was key. It's fair to say that every year there are 30 to 40,000 people who die of the flu in the United States. It is very unlikely we'll ever reach the level we annually lose to the flu. Good. When people believe that, the panic will be over on the markets. So watch the markets. When you have a chance, watch any show from January 28th, and you will have a comparison side by side with my show on January 28th. Here I am talking with Byron York from Tuesday, January 28th of the Washington Examiner, cut number 25. Now, Byron, for the 20 years I've been doing this show, on 4 previous occasions, we've had pandemic scares. H1N1, bird flu, MERS, SARS, and Ebola. I've always covered them because I read The Great Influenza, and I know at 100-year cycles, pandemics devastate the world. And I mean devastate, like 1918 to 1920, the Spanish flu, the Great Influenza. And so I'm paying attention right now very closely to coronavirus, and I know 108 people are dead in China, and we've got 5 cases in the United States. Actually, we're following 100-plus people. We got 20 airports on lockup. Does that break through the impeachment bubble that it's also disturbing markets? Or does a story like Kobe's death, which has rattled the West Coast where I am right now, and I think the world, do they break through the impeachment bubble that a lot of people just don't give a doggone what they're doing, that the world is focused elsewhere? That was to Byron York. Let's go to cut number 6, cut number 26, which is segment 6 on the same day. Even though 108 people are dead in China and Hong Kong has curtailed inflow from mainland, and the mainland have a big problem. They're up to 108 deaths, 4,500 cases. I'm looking at the Guardian. Coronavirus Foreign Office finalizing plans to evacuate Britons. In fact, the United States is chartering a plane that will bring Americans from Wuhan to Alaska, where they'll be screened, then to Ontario Airport, California, where they'll be screened again, and then they will be tracked. We still not know where patients A, B, C, D, and E in the United States came or when they arrived. I cannot figure out the CDC, but we're watching it, and we're watching markets. Now, January 28th is a Tuesday. Senator Tom Cotton comes onto the program and says this, cut number 27. Does any work get done on coronavirus or anything else if there are...
Well, Hugh, I certainly hope so, because I think in a year people may be looking back from this time and talking about coronavirus more than this impeachment trial. But yes, during depositions or litigation, the Senate should go back into legislative business, as happened in 1999.
Tom Cotton was first to the bell as an elected official. I'll never forget that. He was first. He raised the alarm. Tom Cotton will be up after the break. Colonel Randall Larson is on the Johns Hopkins staff. He was my guest on January 28th. Again, it's a Tuesday. It's a longer segment. Let's play that cut number 28. In just the last 22 minutes, news of the coronavirus got significantly more interesting. In Japan, there was reported the first case of coronavirus not related to Wuhan travel. That means domestic transmission. 11 minutes ago, Taiwan reported the same thing. The first case of domestic coronavirus transmission, one now in Japan, one now in Taiwan. The significance of that? Well, I'll ask our expert. Colonel Randall Larson, United States Air Force retired, is the National Security Advisor at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security and a senior fellow at the Homeland Security Policy Institute at George Washington University. He is my friend, Jim Tallent's go-to guy. He told me to get the Colonel. And good morning, Colonel. Great to have you on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning, Hugh.
What is the significance of domestic transmission of coronavirus in Japan and Taiwan?
Okay, the Chinese director of public health said 2 days ago that there was human-to-human transmission. The Center for Disease Control in the United States said they couldn't confirm it yet, but it certainly sounds like that's what we're seeing now. People have returned from China carrying this disease and then gave it to someone in their home country, Taiwan and Japan, which means that this is eerily similar to two exercises we did at Johns Hopkins University Center for Health Security. Senator Jim Talent played in one in May of 2018. We recently did one in New York City in October of 2019, and that one was eerily similar to what we're seeing right now. It starts with just a handful of cases in a few countries where a coronavirus did a genetic shift, and all of a sudden it went from animals to humans. And first reports in these exercises were, there's only 6 or 7 countries that have it, a handful of people. But with geometric progression, how quickly within a week or two that can spread. The exercise we did in New York City last October was focused on the economic consequences of a pandemic. This has all the elements of that. In the exercise we did, 65 million people eventually died in an 18-month period, and the global economy took an enormous downturn because people become afraid to move around. They don't go to work. It's a very serious potential. Doesn't mean it's going to happen that way, but everybody in the healthcare industry is very concerned about which way this could go.
That was Colonel Randall Larson from Johns Hopkins on this program January 28th, more than 2 months ago, 9 weeks ago. That was available. Who do you trust in the media? Trust people that find people who know what the news means. Trust me and trust other people who were right. All right. I wish I had been wrong. I wish I'd been right about Bernie Sanders and wrong about the virus. I was wrong about Bernie Sanders and right about the virus. But I think the virus is a lot more important than the fact that Bernie fell apart because the left wing watches media. The left wing that watches media had no idea this was coming. ReliefFactor.com sponsors the show. There's the bag. It's the North Carolina blue with the lime green. Tens of thousands of people take it every morning, as I did this morning in the first hour, and I remind you about it 2 more times during the show. After this show, I go out on my empty bike path, and I do yesterday was 6 miles, today's a 4-mile walk, because you got to alternate run and walk if you're getting into this, if you're just learning how to do this. New muscle groups are aching. I'm not going to be as fast as our next guest, Tom Cotton, who comes up. I was faster than he was when I was his age, but, I'm older now. But ReliefFactor.com, whether you're exercising or aging, you need to use it every single day. $19.95 gets you the starter pack. Go and get it, and then come back to the show during the break, because Senator Tom Cotton, who was first to the bell, as you just heard, first to the bell, joins me to tell me how did he know, what did he get briefed on, why was he first when we return to the Hugh Hewitt Show, the show you can trust. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. Today's show is about whom you should trust in the media. You might want to trust the people that were right in January about this virus. The first to the bell among elected and appointed officials was Senator Tom Cotton. He joins me now. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Hugh. It's good to be on with you.
Thank you. I am curious, why did you know about this, and why did you go public early on about the virus?
So, Hugh, I'm not a scientist or doctor. I'm certainly not an epidemiologist, but I saw two things from China by about mid-January that told me this virus posed a grave threat. On the one hand, all of the happy talk from the Chinese Communist Party and all the lies they were telling the world and the WHO, like that they had it under control and it couldn't be transmitted from person to person, and so on and so forth. And that contrasted with the extreme draconian measures they were taking, locking down an entire city, the size actually larger than New York City, locking people in their apartment building, literally welding the door shut or hammering boards across the doors and the other outlets. So those two contrasts told me that something was up, and all that came from public information, Hugh. A lot of perhaps obscure or esoteric sources from the East Asian news media or medical sources, and for that I have to credit John Ellis, longtime Fox News executive and election desk analyst, and just all-around media impresario. He has a morning newsletter called News Items that I would encourage all of your listeners to subscribe to if you don't. John does a very good job of collating news from all around the world, more than just political news of what's happening out in the real world. And that's what first brought to my attention some of these sources from East Asia and the medical press about the severity of this virus.
Now, within the administration, Robert O'Brien, Matt Pottinger, and today's story, Peter Navarro, joined you in sounding the alarm. It was not widely agreed upon within the administration that this was a problem. What held back some elements of the administration?
Yeah, I can tell you, Hugh, that during the impeachment trial, which began the Thursday before Martin Luther King Day weekend, I stepped down of the trial to repeatedly take phone calls, especially from Robert O'Brien and Matt Pottinger. Matt in particular, Matt speaks Mandarin and was a journalist in for the Wall Street Journal in China before he became a Marine. So he has particular expertise in these matters. And we worked together on a number of fronts. Eric Ueland, I also credit. Eric is the legislative affairs director at the White House, and Eric was on the Senate floor every day in January for the impeachment trial. So we spoke repeatedly about necessary steps to take, most importantly, the grounding of air travel from China. I think, Hugh, as you still see today, when you're talking about measures to mitigate the spread, many people in the administration were understandably concerned about the economic impact of stopping travel from China. I mean, given the economic catastrophe we're facing because of this virus, it now seems a quaint concern, but it's understandable, and it's repeated time and time again in these public health emergencies that people worry about other concerns up front before they realize just how bad the virus can become. But I think the president, to his credit, ultimately overrode the advice of some of his economic and even his public health advisors, and sided with his more security-focused advisors in shutting down travel from China. That really bought us a number of weeks.
Is there any doubt in your mind that impeachment obscured the virus's spread and stymied the American response?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt, Hugh, and no fair-minded person could doubt that it certainly took attention away in official Washington, whether it's the Congress, the administration, the media, what have you, of what could have been an earlier warning. Everyone in January was obsessed with the impeachment trial. I talked to some of my Senate colleagues about this virus during the trial, and while they seemed curious and a little bit concerned, then they were back to drafting what questions they were going to submit to the president's lawyers or to the impeachment managers. It's hard to know in retrospect whether we could have taken steps that would have altered the course of the outbreak had we not been in an impeachment trial, but there's no doubt, of course, Hugh, that it distracted attention in official Washington away from this growing outbreak in China.
Senator Cotton, you did a lot of media. I have been replaying my show's coverage of the virus in the last 2 weeks of January. I've got a complete record of what I did. Do you recall anybody on broadcast news, cable or network, who covered the virus accurately and thoroughly in the second half of January?
Only Hugh Hewitt.
I mean, broadcast television. I was canceled by then. I was.
No, Hugh, I don't offhand. I'll admit to you, I don't watch a lot of broadcast television, though. But no, I don't remember in late January and early February much conversation about this virus. If I recall, attention was focused almost exclusively on impeachment, and what little room left was dedicated to the Democratic presidential primary.
I think you're right, and I believe the debates that were hosted during that time, they glancingly referred to the virus. It is nobody's fault, but I don't want broadcast history rewritten. I don't want political history rewritten. I don't want the memory hole to open up and swallow up what was a massive failure on the part of the media. Tom Cotton did his best to sound the alarm. Some of us listened. Thank you, Senator Cotton. Hour number 3 of a special edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show continues on this April 7th. More than 10,000 Americans have died. If you believe the Chinese numbers, worth over 75,000 worldwide. I don't believe those numbers. I don't believe the Iranian numbers either, but that's the minimum. More coming up. Hour number 3 of the Hugh Hewitt Show straight ahead. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening on this Tuesday in April 7th. I am reviewing for you who you ought to trust in the media and suggest that you use a template of what they reported in January, the second half of January, and I've been reviewing for you what I did. I have no judgment to pass on anyone. I've been wrong a lot in 20 years on this show, 30 years in media, but I was right about this virus, and I was right early. And I am just driving that home today, that people had all the information they needed to report on this. On Wednesday, January 29th, here is my opening monologue cut number. By the way, let me give you the numbers first because you want the breaking news. We have 357,000 cases in the United States right now. 10,783 people have died. 1,164 people died yesterday, Monday, April 6th. We know that worldwide there are at least 1,348,000 cases and 74,369 dead, but we do not believe the numbers out of the People's Republic of China at all. We do not believe the numbers out of Iran at all, and therefore those numbers are understating the world's problem. I believe the United States is rallying and getting together and will lead the world. I think the president is doing a fine job in doing that. I believe the media hates him so much that they're missing much of the story, just like they missed the story in January. But I didn't miss the story. Here's the opening monologue from Wednesday, January the 29th, more than 60 days ago, cut number 29. Let me bring up to speed on coronavirus first. I believe that for the foreseeable future, I'll be beginning every program with an update. The death toll has risen to 132 in China, with more than 5,974 confirmed cases of the infection. As of their Wednesday morning in China, a day-over-day increase of more than 1,000. Germany reported 3 new cases late on Tuesday and said they are all connected to the country's first patient, a 33-year-old man who is most likely infected by a Chinese business visitor from Shanghai who met him at a German company workshop. So a Chinese traveler went to a German shop, infected the person at the German shop, who in turn infected 3 other people. That's called human-to-human transmission and a domestic transmission. Deeply, deeply troubling. British Airways has suspended all flights from the mainland China terminals. And on Wednesday, they said 132 people had died. And this is a little bit later than the earlier report I read you from 8 hours ago. The number is up to 5,974 cases. 6 countries, including China, have confirmed human-to-human transmission. 6. Those include those 4 cases in Germany connected to a single person. That is a very worrisome sign for containment. Senator Tom Cotton yesterday called for the suspension of all direct flights to the United States from China. And Hong Kong is facing a nurses' strike today, I am told, because they are concerned that 150,000 people came over from the mainland in the last week, flooding into Hong Kong and increasing the risk of a rapid spread of the disease there. The difficulty that we all face here is that known unknowns. We know we don't know what's going to happen. That's a known unknown, as Secretary Rumsfeld would say. Americans evacuated from China are undergoing screening in Alaska before they're going to be quarantined. A chartered plane carrying more than 200 Americans from Wuhan, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in China, landed in Anchorage shortly after 9:20 p.m. local time on Tuesday. The 240 passengers included diplomats and business people. They were undergoing medical screening. Then they're flying on to March Air Reserve Base in Riverside County. Nobody ever goes to March. I mean, March that's a quarantine. Out in Moreno Valley. Been there a few times myself. They're going to be held in a remote location. What, for 2 weeks? It's an asymptomatic contagious disease. Everybody can be fine, and you're going to have 240 carriers. Can we stop right there? There are people in this country who still do not know what asymptomatic transmission and carrier mean, including, apparently, the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, as of this week, did not know that asymptomatic transmission was a thing. That was January 29th on this show. I was also joined on this show by Representative Mike Gallagher on January 29th. That is a Wednesday, to talk about Senator Cotton's call to end all flights from China, cut number 31. Coronavirus first. Admiral Stav is very concerned. Tom Cotton wants to shut down all incoming flights from China. What's Mike Gallagher think? The intel officer from the Marine Corps. Put your hat back on.
I agree with Senator Cotton, the second fastest man in Congress, that we do need a targeted travel ban. This is getting very concerning. We have more cases not just within China, but we've also seen some disturbing news out of Germany and elsewhere around the world. And so I think a targeted travel ban where we halt all flights from China and that U.S. citizens could be allowed to return home after they've gone through what Cotton referred to as appropriate elevated monitoring. I think that makes enormous sense. And I believe he referenced Benjamin Franklin's maxim that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think there are a few other things that are apparent as this unfolds. One is that China's early warning and monitoring systems are clearly deficient. There's so much corruption in the CCP system that incentivizes covering things like this up. The 2003 SARS outbreak proved that to be true. And China's so-called wet markets, where, for example, you have humans slaughtering birds out in the open, are a huge source of this problem, and they should be shut down. This should be subject...
Gallagher is telling you exactly what you're hearing now on television from talking heads. Representative Gallagher is saying shut down the wet markets on January 29th on this show. Robert Costa of the Washington Post joined me to discuss the virus on January 29th on this show. Cut number 32.
It's echoing that people are watching the market as well. I mean, there's a lot of unease in the market. It went up yesterday after the big drop Monday. But there's concern about the health of Americans. Is the president going to go to Atlanta, to the CDC? What does this mean for the global economy if all these manufacturing centers somehow fall away or are struggling? It's a real issue. It's the issue probably globally, but impeachment is hovering over Washington for the moment.
Well, I said yesterday, the Church of D.C. is worshiping an impeachment, and the rest of the country is watching coronavirus. And I can't stress enough how Jim Talent is probably the smartest man in D.C. about this. He and Bob Graham used to co-chair the bioterrorism task force. He told me about the Johns Hopkins experiment. Does President Trump need the equivalent of Ron Klain, who became President Obama's Ebola czar? Does President Trump need someone in that role?
Well, I'm not here to advise the president, but it's clearly an issue that's only going to grow bigger, especially after impeachment is over. You have many senators talking about it, and if this thing spirals out of control, and with Huawei on the top of mind too, you see China again emerging as a real issue, maybe a curveball issue for 2020 that we didn't think would dominate as much.
A curveball, indeed. I'm not the Houston Astros, but I saw the signs. Robert O'Brien, National Security Advisor, joined me on air on January 29th to discuss this, cut number 33. Coronavirus. Senator Cotton yesterday called for suspension of all inbound flights from China. Is that on the table, and do you believe that you are adequately prepared for the coronavirus in the United States?
It's an incredibly dangerous virus. We're meeting on it every day. The president's being briefed by his advisors, Alex Azar, by CDC, on a almost hour-by-hour basis. So we're watching it carefully. We did note that the British Airlines, one of the great airlines in the world and with a very international reach, has suspended direct flights in and out of mainland China. So we're monitoring that. I believe that was a company decision, not a UK government decision, but I think that sends a message to the American people. The travel advisory at the State Department has been up to level 3, so we're encouraging folks without essential business in China not to go to China, and we'll keep looking at things. But this virus is deadly, and it's a matter of great concern to the president and the administration.
That was on January 29th. The president suspended flights from China 2 days later. I just want you to know the curtain is not always up on what the government knows and is doing for good reasons, but the curtain is always up on the media, and the media was not paying attention generally. Some of us were. Who should you trust? Those of us who told you it was coming. I'm encouraged. A few of you have said to me, thank you for the warning that you altered your investment portfolio as a result. I'm here to tell you that andrewandtodd.com are people you can trust as well. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, 888-888-1172, but the best thing to do is to go to andrewandtodd.com, answer a couple of questions. They'll be right back to you. andrewandtodd.com. If you have to get money out of your house or you want to buy an investment property, you're a senior and you think, oh, golly, I'd better get some money out of my house, The appraisals will still be high, and andrewandtodd.com will get it done for you. Overnight, it looks like the glimmers of hope are impacting the markets. Overnight, Japan went up 2%, Hong Kong went up 2%, England's up 2.5%, Germany's up 3.5% at this hour. I don't know what the markets will do today in America. Amazon had a great day yesterday. The markets had an extraordinary day yesterday. There's good news on the horizon all over the world. Is it enough to sustain a rally? I don't know, but interest rates are great. AndrewandTodd.com. I'll be right back, America. More of the Look Back Show as we look forward here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. It is Tuesday, April the 7th. I'm devoting today to the question of who should you trust in the media. If they were not covering the coronavirus in the second half of January, the answer is not them. Really? Do they not do any work at all? Do they not study? Do they not read? Do they only follow the shiny object? Here's my opening monologue on Thursday, January the 30th. We're about 10 days into my coverage, 2 weeks into the opening of the virus coverage on January 30th of this year, cut number 34.
Lead story is coronavirus. The latest statistics this morning. Brought to you from the New York Times. By Thursday, quoting the Times here, the number of confirmed cases of the new coronavirus had risen to 7,711 worldwide, according to Chinese officials and the World Health Organization. All but 68 of those infections have been in mainland China. 38 more deaths in China from the coronavirus were announced on Thursday, bringing the total to 170. It's 170 out of 7,000, 400 basically. One person died in southwestern province of Sichuan. Another 1,737 new cases were recorded in the past 24 hours. Containment, not so much. China's National Health Commission on Sunday said that the virus was contagious even in its incubation period, which lasted up to 14 days. So you understand and get it, and you're contagious for 14 days. The new study by Chinese scientists has suggested the period between exposure to the coronavirus, and symptoms could be as long as 5.2 days. That varied among patients. The team studied the first 425 people infected with the new coronavirus, and their findings support a 14-day observation period for people who might have been exposed. So you can be contagious for 14 days, you can be asymptomatic for at least 5, and it's spreading wildly in China. Now to the South China Morning Post. This is where you go for the good stuff, right? They are way ahead of the curve. Much later in the day over there. It's 4:30 in the afternoon in South China right now, where the Morning Post, it's a Hong Kong newspaper, comes out. Public health experts say the WHO needs to declare the coronavirus outbreak in the Chinese city of Wuhan a global emergency, as Beijing itself locks down cities containing more than 50 million people in the world's biggest ever national response to an infectious disease crisis. The call comes as the World Health Organization is set to reconvene its emergency committee in Geneva later on Thursday, the third time in a week, to assess whether the new virus spreading from China now constitutes a public health emergency of international concern, or a PHEIC, P-H-E-I-C, PHEIC. The pneumonia-like illness has killed 170 people and sickened more than 7,000 in China so far, with dozens more cases, 68 to be specific, confirmed elsewhere, including in the U.S., Japan, Thailand, and Germany. The 16 independent experts on the WHO's Emergency Committee will advise Director General of the WHO on the decision and give recommendations for managing the outbreak. Tedros, who is the WHO's Director General, met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing earlier this week to discuss the situation. The WHO twice last week decided to hold off from declaring a public health emergency, saying it was too soon, raising concern among experts that the virus could get beyond control if swift action was not taken.
The WHO has been revealed as corrupt. The WHO has been revealed as under the malign influence of the Communist Chinese Party. Not the people of China. They don't want to be sick. They count on their Chinese Communist Party to respond. They did not respond, but I think you have heard for the fourth or fifth time in the course of this show, in January, the first 2 weeks that I cover it were the last 2 weeks of January, at least 4 or 5 different references to asymptomatic transmission, which is news to a lot of people. And if you're wondering, how did I cover this so much? It's because I do my job. And a lot of the people in media don't. They cover what's easy. They don't do any reading. They still haven't read The Great Influenza by John Barry. It's simply astonishing to me. I do want you to go to nosafespaces.com. If you're quarantined and you're wondering what to watch Dennis Prager and Adam Carolla explain to you why so much of the university world is completely closed information like what I'm playing to you. nosafespaces.com. And don't forget jobcreatorsnetwork.com. If you're a small business, Phase 4 is being put together right now. Join together with your other small businesses at jobcreatorsnetwork.com and become a voice for recovery in Phase 4. I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show, April 7th, 2020. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Today's radio show is about whom do you trust in the media. The government cannot always show you what's behind the curtain, but media is supposed to if they know, if the media is doing its job, if they're working at it. Use their January reporting on the virus as your guide as to whom to trust going forward on everything. Today I've devoted my whole show, and I'm going to post an audio file at my YouTube channel so you can send it everywhere. If you go to YouTube and type in my name, Hugh Hewitt, you'll find my channel, and you should subscribe to it. We put the best stuff up there. The Tom Cotton interview will be up, the video and the audio, but I'm going to compress the entire show into one audio file so you can send it everywhere when you hear, no one warned me, no one told me. Just go subscribe to my YouTube channel and then send them this. Here is Jim Talent, who you've heard me referring to throughout the course of this show, which has covered January 20th and will conclude with January 31st in the next segment. Here is Jim Talent on Thursday, January the 30th, talking about the virus. Cut number 35.
I want you to comment on Senator Tom Cotton's tweet of yesterday. He wrote, China, but also Germany, Japan, Vietnam, Taiwan, all countries with person-to-person transmission of coronavirus. Meanwhile, flights from China are landing in the U.S. every hour. This has to stop. What do you think, Jim Talent?
I think there's a very good chance that this doesn't happen like today. It'll be soon. I think Tom is in the ballpark. I do have a lot of faith in our public health officials at the CDC, and I think they'll take the right step when we need to take it. Can I give you 4 new things about this, or
yes.
4 just real quickly? Okay. The first thing is the key thing at this point, a lot of questions, okay? The key thing is what's called the R0, which is the average rate of infection from one person to another. How many people is an infected person on average likely to infect? So if that number is 1 or below, they don't really worry about a pandemic. If it's above 2, and the further it is above 2, it's concerning. It's very concerning, and we don't know yet. Because to figure it out, they have to do what they call gumshoe epidemiology. They have to go back and talk to people who are infected, find out how they got it, and construct conclusions over time, okay? Different countries are coming to different conclusions. I have not heard one that is below 2, okay? Now, again, we don't know, and we'll know more on that issue, which is the key issue, I think, in about a week.
R0.
2.
Okay.
Yeah, R0. I think it's NAUGHT.
R0. Okay.
2, everybody says, this is good news, the Chinese are being much more transparent this time. So I tell people, this is not the time to beat up on the Chinese, okay? We need to work with the Chinese. I mean, I get it, but they're being much more helpful this time around, and you understand why. 3, a piece of good news. I mean, the bad news is it's highly unlikely we're going to be able to get a vaccine in a relevant time frame. As Randy Larson told you, you can't just spend a bunch of money and flip a switch and get a vaccine. The good news is, what I'm hearing is there are promising antivirals that will be therapeutic, and that's really important. And so the issue there is, how good are the ones we have? Can we make other ones, and can we manufacture them quickly and get them distributed? And what is the FDA going to do in terms of approval processes? I mean, these are things that are being talked about now. The good news from a diagnostic front is that you can diagnose this in about an hour. The bad news at this point is you have to have a sample of the disease in order to do it, and only the CDC at this point has it. So what I'm told is that suspect cases have to be sent to the CDC now. But the CDC is acting very quickly to get samples out to all the states. What we really need is point-of-care diagnosis, so local hospitals can do it, so we can get it really. What
are we
really
doing,
quickly.
Jim Talent, in less than a minute, about people landing from China? Are we asking them to self-report? Are we following them? Are we tracking
Well,
them?
the only thing I've heard is that one group that we've moved to an Army base, and this is the sort of thing we're going to have to consider, because what if you are going to quarantine people who are coming in, where do you put them? I mean, what do you do? And if the numbers, what Stav was saying is correct, we want to see, the numbers have gone vertical in China. The way these things work is you get 2 cases, 3 cases, 4 cases, 5 cases, and then when it's bad, it goes to 50, 100, 500, and what you're seeing in China now.
Jim Talent should have been on every network, every single network. He's the smartest guy in Washington, D.C. about this. Some people did cover it. Chuck Todd, my friend from NBC, did. Chuck was on the show with me on Thursday, January 30th, cut number 36.
Grim stuff. Hewitt's rule. If you get behind on a disaster, you can never catch up. It's the Katrina rule. I think Trump is close to being behind on coronavirus. What do you think?
Well, it's a risk. I think that his I look at this and it's a reminder that China's got a long way to go. I mean, I think this is scary. It's a reminder that there's a lot of China that's still third world. We think of them as this economic power, this technological rival, and in some cases they are. But look at how far behind that society is on the basics. When it comes to dealing with a healthcare crisis like this, they are showing their struggles to managing a large population, which is obviously of great concern to the rest of the world, since they could, something like this could create a pandemic in quickly. I do think the president's sort of light touch with Xi, he always has such a personal light touch with him, is risky. It's always risky for him politically.
Chuck Todd was right about China not having it under control. Very few people were. I was one of them. Dr. Amesh Adalja joined me on the same day, Thursday, January 30th, to tell us the bottom line because of China's negligence. Cut number 37.
Joined by Dr. Amesh Adalja, he is an infectious disease doctor at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Dr. Adalja, welcome. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What is the most important thing for my audience to know about the Wuhan coronavirus?
The most important thing to know is that there are a lot of unanswered questions, and the experience in China is probably a harrowing thing for the people that are living there, but it's unclear where we can put this new virus in terms of risk stratification, because we don't quite understand the severity. We don't quite understand how many mild cases there are to severe cases. And you have to remember that coronaviruses do cause mild illness in a lot of people. And some of the panic that's going on in the United States, for example, is really unwarranted because the cases we have here are well contained. And there's actually been no severe cases or deaths really outside of China, or no sustained transmission outside of China. So there's a very different disparity there's a big disparity between what's going on in China and what's going on in the rest of the world.
Senator Talent, who was on last hour and served on the Commission on Biohazards and Pandemic Threats for many years, with Senator Baumgart, Democrat of Florida, said the R0 factor on coronavirus, the Wuhan coronavirus, is not known at this point, that it's above. If it is above 2, he will be concerned. Do you have a guesstimate on that yet, Doctor?
I don't have a really strong guesstimate on it, because when you're in the early days of an outbreak and you don't have full information, you can really get fooled by the data and come up with R0 or reproductive numbers for the virus, how many other people it infects that are way off from the actual. We clearly know that in parts of China it's above 1 because there's chains of transmission that are going on. And for some people, it would be, the R0 would be 0 because the patients in the United States, we've had no transmission, so their R0 is 0. So when you come up with a big number, 1 R0 for the whole world, it's really dangerous to do that, because it's not necessarily that there's just this magical number that governs everyone's transmission. So I do think it's somewhere probably in the range between the 1 and 2 range, but it's hard to know exactly where it fits, because there has not been a strong effort to find the mild cases in China. And the mild cases may be what's driving the transmission. So you can kind of get it's kind of a technical thing, but you can kind of get a wide range of R0, none of which are really true.
Dr. Adalja was on to it. We didn't get the transmission data. Dr. Birx has said this obliquely, that this is China's fault, that we did not understand that its R0 was much higher than we suspected. Emily Baumgartner, a Los Angeles Times reporter, joined me on Thursday, January 30th as well, to talk about what people were beginning to say, although it wasn't reflected in the broadcast media, except on places like this show. Cut number 38.
What are you seeing in your reporting about whether or not Americans are unduly or unnecessarily concerned about coronavirus, or are they too indifferent to it?
It's a great question. I think we're seeing lots of reports across the country of masks selling out, people being very concerned. From the looks of it right now, there's really no reason to be doing anything other than washing your hands. That's not to say that this will not become a greater concern in the United States, but right now, with 5 cases and a very strong public health system, it's not something that every American should be worried about nearly as much as they're worried about catching the seasonal flu.
Are people canceling their travel plans to China in your reporting?
As far as I can tell, that's being done both voluntarily and involuntarily. I'm sure you've heard about some of the commercial flights being canceled. And according to travel advisories coming out of the federal government, in many cases it makes sense, particularly for Wuhan province. Yes, we are seeing that indeed.
January 30th, Emily Baumgartner. She's a fine reporter. Most media just wasn't taking it serious. Here is my opening monologue from Friday, January 31st. It's the last segment I'll play for you, cut 39.
Earlier this morning, Singapore closed its borders to all Chinese travelers. Singapore closed its borders to all Chinese travelers. Before I go to the impeachment sham, because that's not a story because we know how it's going to end, let's go to the epidemic. From the New York Times, coronavirus live updates. State Department tells Americans, do not go to China. New York Times, more than 200 people have died, 9,800 infections. Bigger than SARS now. Facebook says it will stop to act to stop coronavirus-related misinformation. The first 2 confirmed cases have come to Britain. China is bringing home Wuhan residents from foreign countries. That's odd. And after a false alarm on a cruise ship, Italy had to report its first case anyway, and the WHO declares what we already knew. The coronavirus is a global health emergency.
Stop right there. Did you hear that? January 31st. Italy declared its first case. Italy on January 31st. For 2 weeks on this show. From January 20th through January 31st, I sounded the alarm again and again and again. And 95% of American media did